we are officially live. And I want to thank so much Julie Neal, who is joining us this evening here in the US, in the morning in the Philippines. Julie's going to give you a little bit more background on how we know one another, and we'll also kind of share her background, her story, and kind of give you more about her. But I would just say that Julie is a dear friend and also somebody who I have worked really closely with over the last probably 10 plus years, I think we figured. And Julie will share that story with you. But what I just want to say is I'm so honored that she's, presenting this evening. Julie is the founder of Mother's Quest, and she also has a child with special needs, which is what's made the connection, where we've been able to make a connection. And she's going to really talk about tonight the inspiration about just totally being, living an epic life while being able to support children or family members with special needs and or not special needs. And so with that, I'm going to let you, Julie, kick it off. And I'm going to be dialoguing with Julie back and forth, but I do have Nathan with me this evening. So you hear a little humming, he's here with us. And I'm going to go on mute while Julie is presenting, but I'm going to stay live here, but I am going to go on mute. So, and I'll unmute when I'm ready to speak.
Okay. So. Thank you, Lisa, for the warm welcome. I'm really honored to be here. I'll go ahead and start my first slide. So as you heard Lisa share, I'm Julie Neal. I'm the founder of Mother's Quest, which is a community and a coaching practice and a podcast and more for mothers who are on a quest to live what I call an epic life. And I'm going to share more about what that means. I'm also a mom to two boys who are both differently wired in different ways and have different needs. And that's a picture of them there, along with our therapy pup, who looks especially big in this photo. But Jacob, the younger one, is 8.5. He has ADHD, and we discovered last summer that he also has dyslexia and dysgraphia. And then my teenager, Ryan, who is 17, is autistic and highly gifted. So I have had my feet in the world of advocating for a child who has extra needs. Now for, let's see, Ryan was diagnosed at 18 months. So, almost at least 16 years almost. And I also have my feet in two different parts of the parenting world. So it has been helpful sometimes to still remember what it's like to have a young child and then be learning new things about what it is like to parent a teenager. I also had about 7.5 years of infertility. And between supporting Ryan and his needs and years of infertility, trying to get pregnant, it felt like an entire decade of my life had been consumed by motherhood. And I had come from the youth development and community building field. I was really committed to making an impact in the world, working a lot in very diverse urban communities, supporting young people to step into their leadership to make a difference in their communities and neighborhoods. But I felt like I had sort of stopped growing professionally, and again, felt pretty overwhelmed by motherhood. It had grown me in amazing ways that I had never imagined possible, but it also had me losing myself in many ways. So let me move to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what happened next that brought me to creating Mother's Quest. But first, I want to tell you what the purpose is of this workshop so that you know what you'll be getting in our time together. I am going to introduce you more to what I call the EPIC framework as a guide for both living your life and inspiring your children. I'm going to highlight 4 practices that I've identified since my Mother's Quest journey began for the first guidepost in EPIC E, which stands for engaging mindfully with our children. And I want to say a quick thing here because Lisa has told me that of all the amazing people listening and tuning in and part of Phoenicia community, that many of you are parents, but many of you are teachers and many of you are therapists. So whenever I speak about our children, I'm thinking of it more broadly. It might be your biological child or a child that you help to raise, but it might also be a child that is a student of yours or a client of yours. And we felt like these practices are really relevant in slightly different ways, but relevant no matter what your relationship is with children. And then because it's really important to me that you leave with something that you're personally taking from this, I'm going to invite you to plant an intention for yourself. And I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by plant an intention. But I am big on metaphors, and that planting really takes the idea of when we plant a seed or we plant a plant or a flower, and we really try to help make sure that we nurture it to help it grow. And maybe in the chat while you're listening, if you can share if anything so far is resonating, or if there's one of those goals for today that is really kind of jumping out at you that you're excited about, would love to hear. So, a little bit more then about how Mother's Quest began. I mentioned that, told you a little bit about my kids and that I had felt like in many ways I lost myself in motherhood. I also, during that time though, began getting training as a life and leadership coach. I worked at a youth development organization where we were really committed to helping young people grow. And we realized that if we wanted the young people to grow, we also needed to be doing that as adults. And I began facilitating a process there that we called adult reflection, which was time and space where adults could press pause, where we could not be focused on the kids, but thinking about our own selves and what was working in terms of how we were working as a team, maybe what was coming up for us as we worked with young people, but also what was happening in our own lives and how we wanted to grow personally and professionally. So I went and got training as a life and leadership coach, and that work felt amazing. And as I continued on my motherhood journey, I wanted to bring together the two worlds, the coaching I had been doing with adults and my own experience as a mother. And I felt like a coaching paradigm could actually be a very powerful one to support not only myself, but other mothers and parents and people that work with young people. So, this name Mother's Quest and this idea about creating a community and coaching programs for mothers was like deep inside me. And I knew deep down that it was something I was supposed to bring to the world. And one day I did a workshop, and then I didn't do anything with it. And a year later, I got reminded by Facebook that it had been a year since I did this workshop. And I had that sinking feeling that, just why hadn't I actually taken action on something that I knew I was being called to do? And I felt very trapped and very frustrated. And that about at that exact same moment, Jacob, who was 4 at the time, and I heard this crashing noise, and it turned out that there were birds trapped in my house. So there's a much longer story with this that you can listen to on the first introductory episode of my podcast. But long story short, when I opened the door for the birds, and you can see the second bird here, I stopped to pause and to reflect and to make some meaning of what this all meant, and realized that opening the door for the bird felt like a metaphor for me, that I had been feeling trapped, like maybe I was crashing against the glass. And I just needed, first, I thought I needed someone to open the door for me. And by the time I found the second bird, I realized that I needed to open the door for myself. And Mother's Quest was born that day, just a little over 5 years ago. I have been all in on it ever since and growing it in powerful, amazing ways that have not only enriched my life, but enriched the life of my children and many mothers in the community. Lisa, just before I started Mother's Quest, was my very first coaching client. And she is one of the most inspiring examples of what is possible when we invest in ourselves. In a future self meditation that Lisa and I did, Lisa envisioned the Phoenixia Foundation, and she envisioned Punta de Gloria Resort. And then years later, we reconnected, and I learned that she had made all of those things real in her life. And she's really living what I call an epic life. So I, epic is both this metaphor for living the kind of life that's filled with what matters and where you are making an impact, not only as a parent or a guide for children, but also in the impact beyond your family or beyond children that you want to make. One night at the kitchen table, I was trying to get clear about what this was, and EPIC came out on a napkin. These are the guideposts, which I'm going to share a little bit more. And then it has evolved as a manifesto, which is the image that you can see on the right. I'll pause for a moment and ask Lisa, is there anything you need me to fill in the gaps, just sort of up until this moment in terms of my background? I can't hear you yet.
I was going to say, I think you've covered it.
Okay, good. I'm trying
Yeah.
to do the slightly condensed
Super
version,
good.
which is hard for me.
Yeah. No, I think it's perfect. It's perfect.
Okay, good. So these are the EPIC guideposts. So I want to share a little bit more about what I mean with an epic life. So I already mentioned it is a metaphor for like a hero's journey, for your journey, for you being the author of your life story. It's also an acronym mnemonic that came out on that napkin one night for the guideposts that I think help us to live that life when we are raising our children or teaching children or nurturing children. And this has become a framework for everything within Mother's Quest. So E stands for engaged, and that's being mindfully engaged with our children. We're present and clear about what we think, feel, and believe. The P stands for purposeful, and it's about pursuing our passionate and purposeful impact and using our gifts to make a difference beyond our family. I stands for invested in yourself, and that is where you focus on your own self-care and your own growth and learning and making sure that you're not losing yourself, as I talked about before, as you're caring for children and young people. And C stands for connected. So that you remember that you don't have to be on the path alone, that you can learn from others, you can get support from others, you can feel love and friendship and camaraderie and solidarity, and you are in community on your journey. So as I mentioned, many things have evolved from this dream I had for Mother's Quest. One of the most amazing has been a podcast that is now over 4 years old and over 80 episodes in, where I get to interview inspiring mothers that are making a difference in many different ways. And those interviews are long. They're like 45 minutes to an hour, and they're in depth. And I had been learning so much from them, and I wanted to see if I could distill down some of the practices and lessons. Also, some people don't have time to listen to those long episodes, and I wanted to create something that could allow people to get like little bite-sized versions of some of the things that I had been learning. And my older son, Ryan, who is the 17-year-old, he had been hearing me say that I want to be a writer. I even refer to myself as a writer, yet I had not published anything yet. And so one day last year, he said, "Mom, I challenge you to write a book in 2020." And I'm, so often part of why I say yes to Mother's Quest is because I know that our children learn so much more from us by what they observe in us than what we tell them. And I felt like this was a powerful opportunity to model saying yes to a dream, even though it maybe felt a little overwhelming, even though I didn't know if I could do it, even if I might have some imposter syndrome that maybe I'm not really a writer or who would want to read these things that I'm sharing anyway. And I said yes. And then I do what I do well, which is I found some guides and I found a way to do it meaningfully. I found a course called the Tiny Book Course. I invited other mothers to come along with me. And there were 5 mothers from the Mother's Quest community that all said yes. And they all also published tiny books. And the idea behind the tiny book is it's something you could go from idea to publishing in 45 days, and that it doesn't have to feel like an overwhelming task, but something that's really that you can accomplish. So I'm honored to say I opened sales for my inspiration guide today, actually. And I'm looking forward to bringing it into the world. And this is my first time sharing from some of the lessons in the book in this webinar. So, volume 1 of the inspiration guide is just focusing on my how I started Mother's Quest, and then the first guidepost E for engaged mindfully with our kids. And so here's where we're going to delve much more deeply. So I've written here, this is a page from the book. E is being mindfully engaging with our children for me means that we bring thoughtfulness, intention, and presence to how we interact with our children, that we see them and embrace them for who they are, and that we allow ourselves to engage in a reciprocal relationship with them, knowing that they can bring as much wisdom and insight to us as we strive to bring to them. And the example of Ryan challenging me to write the book is a perfect example of that reciprocity, that we can really both inspire one another and learn from one another. So this is the first practice that I highlight in the book, that I felt like I had been integrating in my life, both from lessons of the podcast and then things that I was experiencing. And all of these practices are actually really simple things that I think we all know deep down, but we sometimes forget. And the first one is to make space for mindfulness. So when we want to be mindfully engaged, we have to actually create the space for it. Sometimes we're so overwhelmed going from one place to the other that we forget to actually slow down and really connect with ourselves and connect with our children, to be curious, to ask them what they think and what they believe and what matters to them, what they're grateful for. So this is one example here of a practice that we have in our family. That is my youngest putting a note into our gratitude jar. And we haven't been using it as much lately. I'm getting a few eye rolls, but we have years of these little notes where, gathered around usually either breakfast or dinner, we'll bring the jar out. We'll each write something that we're grateful for from the week, and we get a chance to share with one another. And a very fun pastime is that we like to dig deep into the jar and pull out something from our past. And it reminds us about how far we've come and where we've grown. So that's Make Space for Mindfulness. The book brings you through a series of sections where, after I share the practice, I share a few things that you can try in your own life. So here for mindfulness, to move my face over, grow your gratitude by being mindful of and naming the things you're grateful for. So this ties to the gratitude jar, but there are lots of different ways that you can use gratitools in your life. And sharing yourself is as important as asking your children. And then the second thing to try is to take advantage of mealtime, car rides, and bedtime to create opportunities for inquiry. Allow space for mutual discovery. Listen to what's bubbling up for your children. Ask your children for advice in your life. Do you want to say a little bit something here, Lisa, maybe about, because we were talking about, I have kids who are differently wired but highly verbal, and we know that people listening have children and clients that have all different kinds of skill levels. So maybe a few words here about space for mindfulness that relates to your experience with Nathan.
Yeah. Well, I would just say that, it is really just cutting out that time and doing the things that, really he enjoys or that can be fully engaging with him. And, some of that is, still playing chase, or it's, spending time just, tickles, or, he loves to do horseback riding. And so being able to, go do that with him, and, even if I'm the one who's leading him around. The other thing that we love to do is we love to walk and take hikes together. I think that's just a time that we can just both really be mindful. And, one of the things that, he has opened my world to see things that I had never seen before. And a lot of those things had come through these walks that we would take together. Is that I would so easily be on a walk, but my headspace would be somewhere completely different. And so now when I walk, I really walk mindfully with him, because he's always observing the trees, the wind blowing, the birds. He may find sticks, or, find also like leaves on the ground, and I would so easily just walk past them, right? So he helps me see the beauty in the nature, and particularly flowers, that I would have just passed by. So I think taking those walks and just being mindful together has just brought so much joy and pleasure in my life, because he's helped me see things that I wouldn't see, and just being more observant of the things around me and not just rushing through them.
Yeah. And I think what you're highlighting is the fact that children communicate in so many different ways. So my kids are talking a lot. And Nathan is communicating in the things that he's observing and that he's bringing to your attention.
Absolutely.
So
And or
let
the joy that he, through his laughter, through his sounds, through leveraging his communication device.
Amazing. Okay, we're going to go to this next slide. So I wanted to highlight some podcast episodes for each practice so that if you want to go deeper and learn from some other of the guests that I've had on the show, you can. These were 3 episodes that had made a big impact for me. Um, this one up here, top left, is an episode with Nancy Netherland. She creates space for gratitude with her 2 girls. They both have rare and chronic illnesses. And 1 or 2 of them are both also differently wired, neurodivergent. And they are often going through really challenging times, managing a lot of pain, in and out of hospitals. And they have found ways, they coined this term gratitools, of really finding the magic even in hard times. I'll sometimes see pictures of Nancy's daughter showing up for her infusion on roller skates. They talk a lot about eating the cake first when it's birthdays, because you don't know if you're going to be feeling well by the end of the day. So they've found ways to really seize a lot of goodness in the midst of challenge. And that's an incredible episode. In this middle one, Lynn Johnson and Allison Kenny, they had something called Spotlight Girls. And they have a Go Girl culture code. And they do a lot of work around actually establishing, like, what are values? Like, what are things that really matter? How do we want to show up in the world? And they co-create that with their daughter and with the young people that they work with. Then the episode with Michelle Gale, she is a mindfulness expert. She also has children who are differently wired. And she was really helpful of sort of thinking about how, when things feel completely chaotic, can you even find mindfulness for yourself so that you can bring that to your children? She gives this great example of how one of her sons was having trouble going to sleep at night, and she would need to stay in the room with him. And she would get frustrated because she was in this program learning about how to do meditation, and she really felt like she needed to go and do her meditation practice. And she eventually realized that her meditation practice could be right there in the room. And she started doing it after she tucked him in. And it was this beautiful way of integrating and really kind of embracing what she was really experiencing with her life and with her kids. So these are all episodes. We can put links in the comments maybe, but if people go to mothersquest.com/podcast, they can look through the archives. And I think many of these are actually categorized under the guidepost. Okay, and then there are questions for reflection in the book after each section. So you can ask yourself, what special rituals to enhance mindfulness and connection could you build into your family routines? And again, for those of you that are teachers or therapists, what kind of rituals can you build into your practice when you see children or young people? And it's really helpful to think about, when are the natural moments in your day when your children are open and receptive to sharing with you? And how could you create more space around those moments to be fully present? So that's the end of this first practice. Anything you want to share there, Lisa, before we move forward? And how am I doing time-wise?
I think you're doing okay. We're at 6:27.
Okay. I'm going to
6:30.
try to move a
Yep.
little bit
I
more.
think we're good.
Make sure we have time for questions and answers. The second practice, again, these sound so basic in so many ways, but they're actually so powerful. The second one is to do something together. So, and you already touched on this too, Lisa, for you and Nathan, that he loves to do art. But I have found that I can create opportunities to do things with my kids, both things they enjoy or things that are important to me that I want to invite them into. And these are 2 photos that are very meaningful to me. Bottom left is Jacob and I at Square Peg, which I know, Lisa, you have gone to for years with your son. Um, it is this incredible, like, ranch where they save the horses, and where kids of all kinds of differences can come and feel fully accepted. Jacob and I go to horse therapy together. We do it on something called Adventure Fridays. Um, now my oldest is having basketball, so we're having to move it to Adventure Saturdays, but we're pretty committed to it and love it so much. It's just a special time where we get to have a shared experience on our own together, and where again we're both growing and learning. Um, and then this top right is a photo of me and Ryan on his 13th birthday. I took Ryan on a milestone hike, which is this reflective process about like, what were his first 13 years of his life like and what were the first 13 years of my life like. And then we went to a recording studio and we recorded our reflections from what came up in the hike. Still one of my all-time favorite episodes. His voice sounds so different now when I listen to it because he's matured so much. But it's like this little time capsule, and it was so great to be able to also ask him like what questions did he have for me, and to be able to really have that special time together and capture it.
Yeah, I was just going to add another, thing to do together is that you so often just throughout your day, I mean, we have to cook, we have to prepare. And one of the things that I started doing with Nathan at a young age is I had him start helping me in the kitchen.
Mm.
I love to cook and to bake. And so we just also get so much pleasure and enjoyment in cooking and baking together. And it's something we all need to do in our day to day anyway. And so it's just another wonderful time that we spend together and do things together.
I love that. That's like yeah, perfect integration of also the mindfulness practice and the
Mhm.
doing something together, both. So these are some things to try. Think about something you enjoy doing and invite your children to join alongside you, and conversely follow your own child's lead, joining them in something that lights them up. Engage with your children in service or other meaningful experiences that will expand their awareness, competence, and contribution. And then these are a couple episodes to go deeper. The one I mentioned with Ryan, where we went on that milestone hike together. Um, this middle episode with activist Paula Mendoza, she's the one that told me about this term they had coined, Adventure Fridays. And I just fully embraced that idea and loved it so much. And then this episode with Karen Baker, who used to work with California volunteers, she talks about all the different ways that it's so helpful and empowering to involve our children in service. And then questions for reflection. What is something you love to do that you'd like to share with your children or your clients or your students? Where are there opportunities in your own community or in your work to meaningfully engage your children? And as we move through these reflection questions, if this brings up anything for you and you want to share them in the chat, I know we can all always benefit from hearing and learning from one another's experiences. So I would invite you to do that.
Yeah, please, put it in the chat. And again, if you have any questions throughout, please put it in the Q&A and or the chat or in the Facebook, because we are watching for them and we'll make sure that we can try to answer them or to share with others.
Okay, so this is the next practice, and this one is to have a courageous conversation. Um, as I've been raising my kids, especially in the United States over the last 4 years, we have had so many issues. A lot of issues of police brutality, issues related to immigration. And as my son has become a teenager, we've had conversations about consent and about, sex and so many conversations that, you know, sometimes we shy away from because it can make us feel uncomfortable, or we can worry that maybe we don't know what to say. My podcast guests have really helped me embrace the fact that these conversations matter, and that our children, we have like sort of some precious time to help shape how they think about the world, and to let them know that we're a safe place where that they can bring their curiosity and their questions, and we can explore some tough issues together. This is a picture of my husband reading to Jacob a book called Best in Me, which is about inclusion. It chronicles, it's actually written by a Mother's Quest member and a former student of mine. And she is a school teacher and wanted to write a book where children of all different ethnicities and abilities who maybe were experiencing bullying or having some self-esteem issues could write affirming poems about themselves, and see that they could really celebrate their differences. And so, using a book like that to bring up the conversation is also a helpful entry point. So these are some things to try. Let your kids know you welcome their honest questions and thoughts on issues like race. Also, be vulnerable yourself and willing to share your own beliefs, your own mistakes and experiences. Find opportunities in daily situations to spark conversation. Then create opportunities for reflection by utilizing books and movies and exploring them together. Movies have also been, and television shows have been a really great way to have a shared experience and be able to have conversations together from there. These are the episodes highlighted. This one with Nicole Lee, who's an inclusion specialist. She really helped me early on get much more comfortable talking about race with my children, but also with adults and in my life. She encouraged me to hold a growth mindset, which some people may be familiar with from Carol Dweck's work at Stanford. We talk about growth mindset versus fixed mindset with our kids a lot, that we want them to feel like they can try new things and they can fail, and that there is no barrier to learning new things. They're not like stagnant in terms of their potential growth. But sometimes we forget to follow the same principles ourselves. This episode with the author of Boys and Sex, Peggy Orenstein, was very powerful in getting me to start opening up to some conversations with my teenager, and just how especially important it is for boys to be able to have the opportunity to explore that. And then I love this episode, bottom right, with Asia Ray. She is an autistic biracial woman. She is the creator of Raising Luminaries, and she's committed to smashing the hierarchy, which is like, against the patriarchy and racism and all the things systems that we need to be breaking down. And she thinks we can do that by raising kind and compassionate kids. She curates all these incredible book lists for addressing all kinds of issues with our children. So if you check out this episode, you can look in the show notes and find links and go explore her work. And for almost any issue, you could find some really incredible books that you can use to help spark those conversations. Questions for reflection. What blocks or biases of your own might you need to unpack or examine in order to lean into courageous conversation with your children? What experiences, challenges, or stories in your own life could you share with your children that might create an opening for conversation? Anything you want to add here, Lisa?
One thing that I was just going to add is, never underestimate our kids who are nonverbal, and just to continue to share with them and to continue to communicate with them, and engage as appropriate. So I feel like, read to them, talk to them, and I try my best to also talk to them just like I would any other. I may take it a little slower with Nathan when I explain things or break it down, but I never try to underestimate what he can or cannot understand. And I think particularly as a teen, I think it is really important. I think you hit on this, and we've hit it on some other episodes, around, just sexuality, when it's appropriate to do certain things, when it's not. So yeah, that would be my feedback is, continue to have conversation.
So helpful. Okay, this practice is called Step Up, Step Back. I mentioned that I come from a youth development background. And when we were working with young people, mostly high school age youth, we spent a lot of time on group agreements. How did we want to be together as a team, as a group of young people and adults? And one of the agreements that would often come up was this language, step up, step back. And what it meant was within the group experience, sometimes you need to actually be willing to put yourself out there, to share your opinion, to say more, to volunteer to do something. But sometimes actually what's needed is for you to kind of step back a little bit, to create more space for somebody else to talk or share, to create space for someone else to have more leadership. And I started to realize that this is a really powerful metaphor for parenting, or again, teaching. Um, that sometimes our kids need us to step up. They need us to create a firmer boundary. They need us to scaffold for them. They need us to put in some structures. They need us to help them build skills. But sometimes what they need us to do is to step back and to allow them to try on their own and to maybe even fail, um, and not always ensure success. And really maybe like wait and see what is it that they want to do, before we jump in and uh-oh, okay. I, I knew this was going to happen to me at least once. I clicked the thing before I was ready. Let me go back to the slide. Okay. Um, really find out what it is that they want to do before we maybe like fill their schedule with stuff. So this is just an example from living my epic life. That was a moment that I remembered. Sometimes we also need to give them more independence and even take a risk. So this was Ryan sending me a text. His best friend had moved to Seattle and he wanted to go visit, and that meant sending him on a plane by himself. We were a little nervous, but felt like he was ready. And when he landed, he had this big smile on his face, and he sent me this text that said, "Hey, Mom, another Niels. I landed safely and I'm having a lot of fun. Thank you for letting me do this. I'll try to keep in touch a little. Enjoy the free time, and I love you." And he had sent that at like, I don't know, 12:30 a.m. So I was uh, excited that he landed and shared that with me and told him I was proud of him, but I still wanted him to go to sleep. So that is one example. These are some things to try. Notice when you're holding tightly to your own expectations for your children and remind yourself that they are on their own journey. Pay attention to when your children are struggling or asking for help. Think about how you can bring more presence or provide structures and supports in an empowering way. So that's both the step up and the step back. These are some great episodes to explore. Um, Deborah Reber, if you don't know her yet, I think you would find so many amazing resources in her community. She created something called Tilt Parenting. It is for parents of kids who are differently wired. I had the opportunity to interview her, and she talked a lot about how she really needed to surrender. That when she finally was able to kind of let go a little bit, with her son, who is autistic and highly gifted, and has ADHD, he really started to flourish and step into her own, and she started to feel so much better. Now, that was years ago when she first started it, and I've been reading some of her things lately, and she has been saying how she has to remember this lesson to surrender again and again. So we go in cycles, and it's not always easy. This episode with former Stanford Dean Julie Lythcott-Haims. She is a prestigious author of the book How to Raise Adults. She talks a lot about how to move our egos out of the way to really allow space for our children to grow. And she has a brand new book out now also called How to Be an Adult, which really it's meant for young adults, just stepping to adulthood. But I started reading it and I feel like it's something every adult could benefit from. And then this episode, with family friend Judy Blank and her daughter, who is trans. Also, a really powerful example of how we can embrace our children for who they are in the world. And I was just so moved by how Judy had become this most incredible advocate, for Corey, and really kind of listened to Corey's desire to forge her path. Questions for reflection. When do you notice it is important to step in more fully with your children? How do you view failure? What would happen if you give your children the opportunity to fail? And these are things are not always easy, but can be so powerful when we allow that. Okay, so those are all the practices that are highlighted in this engaging mindfully with our children. And I mentioned that I was going to invite you to plant an intention. So I want to talk a little bit about that as a metaphor. This picture of me on the left is in my home. I do something called a Mother's Quest Circle. which is a 4-session coaching series that Lisa has been part of more than once, to spark your epic life. And one of the things we do is, after kind of looking to our future vision and then thinking about our present day, is we pick one thing, one intention across one of the epic guideposts. And we plant an intention to really nurture and grow that thing. And when I meet in person, we actually plant real bulbs or seeds, because those become a powerful metaphor to keep in your home, that remind you that you need to water them and give them what they need and put them in the sun. But even if you don't use a physical plant, just this idea of what is an intention that you want to plant, that you want to grow and flourish, can be really helpful. This card on the right is like, one of those little things that you put in the soil that usually tells you, like, you need this amount of sunlight, or you need, to water 3 times a week. For every intention that you make, it's really helpful to think about, what are the care instructions for that intention. So if you're committing to cooking with your child, you're going to choose that mindful engagement and doing something together, and it's more cooking. What actually would need to happen for that to be possible? Maybe you need to ask your partner to go grocery shopping for you because you're working, and you give them the list, or whatever it is that you can think through that will actually set yourself up for success and set that intention up for success, is helpful to put down on, like, your own imaginary care and maintenance card. So what I want to ask you to do before we move into Q&A is to take a moment, reflect a little bit on the practices that I shared and some of the ideas that came up, maybe some of the reflection that you've already had with those reflective questions, and just write down one intention that you would like to plant, something you want to do with the children in your life, whether that's your own children or the children that you work with. And then after you've identified that intention, write down just 2 or 3 things that you think would help that intention to grow. What would be the care instructions that you would need for that intention? We'll give you just a minute to do that and invite you to share again in the comments. And then, Lisa, I don't know if you're seeing anything, if anybody has anything yet, or if anyone has shared anything up until this
I'm,
point that
I
might be.
haven't seen anything yet, but I'm hoping that we will get folks to please put stuff in the chat and also in the Q&A. And I thought, one of the things too is, I went through a phase where I realized I was doing so much, right, and not taking care of myself, right? And so one of the intentions that I realized is, in order for me to be fully engaged with Nathan, I had to make sure that I was taking care of myself. It's almost like when you're on an airplane and they say to put the oxygen mask on first.
Yes.
It's, if we don't do that, then how can we be fully engaged with our children? And so, I was, needing to make sure that I was doing that, right? And some of those intentions were some of the most basic things, but you realize how important it is when you do that. And so, an intention that, I had really, made sure that I was doing is making sure that, one, I'm getting the proper rest. And, another intention for me was, I need to make sure that I exercise, and that I'm doing my stretching because I have arthritis. And if I don't do that, I, am in a lot of pain. And if I'm in pain, then I don't have the patience, right? And so it's so easy for us to take care of others and not taking care of ourselves. And so that is an intention that I am very, very now careful about doing. And then I set that intention is that I have to get those 2 things, right? And it sounds basic, but it's like there are so many things that we get caught up in our lives and we forget to take care of ourselves. And so that's
Absolutely.
the intention that I have just been, this last, 2 years has been a priority now for me, as I'm, as I'm aging, that those are 2 things that I need to do in order for me to be the best that I can be for my family and for Nathan. So,
Yes. So let's invite people. If on your
yeah,
care
please.
list you have not yet identified one thing that you need to actually care for yourself, that will enable you to show up in a more present and full way with the children you work with, you should go ahead and take a moment and identify one thing like that for you. For me, one of the things that makes such a huge difference is a morning practice. If I take even 5 minutes before I start my day to sort of get quiet, I have a deck where I like to go outside. I do like a couple minutes of meditation. I do a little prayer that I sing in the morning and just kind of like listen to the birds outside on my deck. Like it makes such a huge difference for me. So safeguarding even a little something like that for yourself. I did notice that I'm wondering if anyone has put in any things yet. I don't see it, but I did notice there was an interesting question. And I was thinking about this actually as I was presenting, whether there are any cultural differences, because so many of the people that are listening are from the Philippines. So someone named it. Thank you for naming it. Here in the Philippines, talk about sexuality and sex with family members, especially the younger ones, are taboo. At what age should parents start to talk about sex and sexuality?
Mhm.
So I think what I learned from Peggy, and you can both listen to the episode with her, but you can also go to her website because she has all these really helpful resources related to talking to our kids. What I learned from her, and I've been learning from others, is that actually talking about sexuality is something that should happen when your kids are young. It's just that you speak to them in ways that are developmentally appropriate for what they're curious about or what they need to know at the time. So if you go to Peggy's website there, I think she's got some guides for like, what are the kinds of things that would be more developmentally appropriate at different ages? So I'll just answer that question there. And of course, you have to do what also feels right for you and your family. And there are cultural differences. Peggy even talks about the fact that in Europe, um, the parents and the kids seem to have much more open conversations about sex, and the kids were much more open about what they were doing with their parents and not hiding things than in America. So there are differences, wherever you are raising your kids. Okay, so I think then we're at Q&A.
Q&A, and I currently, I don't see any Q&A, which I'm surprised.
So there was that one question, but
I
let's
know, which
invite
is,
anybody listening. There are 26 people
yeah.
listening. What kinds of questions?
We do have a comment, which we have actually two. So I actually want to thank Ma Belinda because she put, I agree, caring for ourselves is essential. So for us to be fit with all the challenges and be at our best to care for them, mental health and stress-free life is important. And she also commented when you were talking earlier in the presentation, is that she agrees that we should talk to them at their age level and be involved with their interests and activities. Also, they need to be encouraged and be appreciated with the milestones that they're making, even if it's just a little success. So, thank you for those comments and that feedback. We really do appreciate. I think, the engagement is just, it's wonderful. So thank you,
And I
Belinda.
think that this is just another lesson, like how important it is to be seen and to see your children or the people that you work with and really acknowledge their growth. But it's also, again, comes back to like our kids learn so much by observing us. I really try to identify the ways that I'm stretching myself, the ways that I'm growing, the things that I'm learning when I hit a milestone. And I think this is also true about mothers in particular. In fact, my episode today on the podcast was with the author of a book called The Three Mothers, the mothers of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and James Baldwin, who were all civil rights icons. And their mothers had these incredible roles in shaping who they are, and yet they had pretty much been erased from history. And there hadn't been very much written about them. And so some of that is there's just this way in which mothers are like seen as the martyr, not seen as whole human beings, don't always claim or share our own successes. And I think today it's really powerful to name those things for your kids, whether it's, modeling that for, your daughters or helping sons to see that what women are capable of. Really powerful opportunities when you do that.
Julie, we do have here, it says, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and experience. It's very informative. especially to, us mothers handling similar situations. We also have Thank You Phoenicia Foundation and Miss Julie, Miss Lisa, and the committee for a very engaging workshop. Listening to your experience and sharing made me more determined to finish my course and attend and listen more to webinar workshops like this so I can understand more and work well within the future pupils and students that I will have. This kind of webinar workshop is highly recommended. I'm an education student majoring in special education. So thank you. That's wonderful. One question here, Julie. Do we have any tips for caregivers who are burnt out, parents who are getting really frustrated with their kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I'll just kind of bring us back to is that the C in EPIC about connected. I just think it's so important that when we are burnt out or we're feeling frustrated, that we don't feel like we have to stay isolated or alone or siloed. The Mother's Quest Circle, which you've been a part of, Lisa, and that I mentioned, can be so powerful because you realize that you're not alone. That what you're going through is something similar to what other people are going through, but sometimes also you can get new perspective. So I would say, sometimes when you're feeling the most down, sometimes at least I might want to retreat, but actually asking for help, reaching out to somebody, reading a book or listening to a podcast or coming on a webinar like this and opening yourself to get like a little spark of inspiration can be helpful. And then, I mean, also thinking about your resources in your community. Are there ways that you can advocate to get more help or more services? And sometimes it is really like taking a break, like asking for, can I have a day or a few days to myself? Finding something that fills you with joy, remembering the things you love, and really building that in. I think we can feel like that is selfish. But as Lisa was talking about so powerfully, like so often when we do that, we're so much better equipped to really show up and to be present and to address the challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, I would just say, on the burnout thing, I think, really trying to, leverage, like Julie was saying, your family and, or your community if you really feel like you need that break. And I really, it sounds crazy, but like, and I know it's hard for many of us who do have kids who are either autistic or special needs who have, strange sleep patterns. So it is like sometimes sleep is one of, I keep saying this, but it is one of those I think we feel more burned out when we don't get the most appropriate sleep. So like, if you can get somebody to say, can you just watch them for 2 hours so I can get a nap? Because that, the more we're energized by having the proper sleep, the more we can actually manage. I think it's being under sleep deprivation is really, it's not good for us. So it's super important that you don't, and not just sleep, but I mean, we all live it. We've all gone through it, and know that you're not alone, and just seek other parents in your community that you can lean on one another. I think is really important that, like I'll take your kid for a couple hours and, we hang out so that you can get a break. And then if you do the same for me. So, really leveraging, the community and having one another support each other, I think is super important.
I have a curiosity for those listening because, we mentioned that a lot of you are maybe not parents, but might be teachers or therapists. I'm curious how these, both the guideposts and the practices, whether they were resonant for you, whether they were applicable for you, and if there's a particular way that you could see how you would bring that into your work. If anyone's open to sharing.
Yeah, I would love to hear that. And I think, just from the engagement that I've had and the outreaches that we've done in the Philippines, I mean, the teachers are just absolutely amazing. And I feel like they are the ones who are supporting, so many families in the Philippines. And I think, to you teachers out there, big thank you. But if you do see a parent that's totally burned out, if you can help them, network within their community to help them, find those little breaks, because I know it can be very difficult there, and not having the resources that, the third worlds have. The first worlds have, that it can be a big stress on families. So, and I know you teachers take a big, big brunt of that for families. So, but the more you can do for the families, the better. So, and then, and another person also said, yeah, a support group. Yeah. Help find a support group or or create one is really important. And then Julie, we're getting so many wonderful, thank you so much, super insightful. And so I'm wondering if we are seeing or hearing anything from any of the teachers of any insights that they might have.
And I know that sometimes people might catch this on the replay, right? It'll be
Yes, so please share.
So if
Messenger
you're
us.
later, still please comment. We'll definitely check the comments and we'll be very curious to hear what you have to share with us.
Absolutely. And so I just want to wrap by saying, Julie, thank you very, very much. And I also just want to thank everybody who's joined the webinar, who's going to, even maybe go back, who maybe is not live with us right now, but will be listening to this. We really appreciate you joining these, listening, providing feedback. And then I also just want to thank everybody out there for your support of Phoenicia Foundation. And a big shout out to all the mothers out there. We want to say happy Mother's Day. I know this is Mother's Day weekend. And I think it's just so wonderful that we were able to bring Julie on for Mother's Day weekend. We didn't really plan it that way.
Timing.
The timing is so perfect. And so where do we go from there? I'll let you, Julie, wrap with that.
Yes. So I think
I'm going to put in also the link, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. So Lisa will put the link in the comments for the inspiration guide if anyone is curious to get a hard copy where you can explore the same questions and write in yourself if you want to. There are other ways to connect to the Mother's Quest community. So I think that question about what do you do when you're feeling burnt out or alone, if the Mother's Quest community can be one place in addition to Phoenicia where you can feel like you can get support, would love to welcome you in. We have a free Facebook community. You can connect with us there. You can tune into the Mother's Quest podcast. And I highlighted some of the episodes in particular that might be useful to you, but there are many others that I didn't share about yet. So you can look through the archives at mothersquest.com/podcast. And then if you wanted to be involved in any coaching programs, you could reach out to me and learn more about that.
And Julie, I don't have, but I'll have you send me the link. And then what we do is after the webinar, everybody will an automatic reply with a link to this episode in a YouTube. They will receive a certificate for attending. And we will also then put the link for everybody who actually went on to register, and I will also put it on our Facebook page. So I'll get that from you and just make sure that we have it. So
wonderful. That's so exciting.
Thanks again, Julie. Have a wonderful
Thank you, Lisa,
for day everywhere. You're welcome.
Such an inspiration.
Oh, thank you, Jules. All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.